Hello. This is the Green Corn Rebellion show. I'm Gregory Harden II, and today I am here with David Griscom, who is the co-host of Left Reckoning and the forever chief economist on the Michael Brooks show.
Mm.
Unless unless Richard Wolff is there, then he's not the chief economist anymore, but still. How are you doing this morning or this evening? Yeah.
Time flies, man. I am good. I'm really happy to be back hanging out with you again. I really enjoyed our last conversation.
Yeah. I don't think you've been on the show
I
yet.
thought, was I not 2 years ago, right?
No, you weren't. No, I don't think so. This is the first time. Yeah.
All
We've
right.
talked before, like me and you have talked before, but I don't think you haven't been on the show yet. Yeah.
All right.
So first
Well,
time on the
first time's the
show.
charm. There we go. There we go.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Stop what you're doing. Okay. If you like this video and you like the other content on my channel, please hit the like button on this video. Also, go hit subscribe like right now. And also, when you hit subscribe, click the bell so you can get notifications whenever I put out a new video. So, thanks. All right, enjoy the rest of the video. Yeah. So first question I have here. Oh, also have to add one of the many people who have influenced my politics in the way that I view things. So you're also one of those people. So there you go.
The honor, man.
Yeah. It's a shame to say that someone from Texas influenced me, an Oklahoman, but it happens to the best of us, I'm sure. But no, first question is, where are you from and where did you grow up? I know Texas, but where at specifically, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so I was born here in Austin, Texas. I sort of lived in between Austin and small towns nearby. Uh, Single mother. I have a big community and family here, though, in Austin. Um, and then I ended up for like high school. Um, my mother remarried, and I lived in South Carolina,
Okay.
North Myrtle Beach area. So that's my origin story, at least geographically. Um, yeah, and, just I definitely consider myself to be, a Texan and a Southerner, and that's a big part of my politics as well as trying to find ways to encourage leftists to be fighting in their own communities, because a lot of people they get out and
Yeah.
then they and I've always found that to be a kind of a negative part of a lot of American leftist politics is that they tend to gravitate, LA, New York, Chicago. Nothing wrong with those places, don't get me wrong, and I did it too to some extent, but I always was trying to make sure that we're advocating for folks in our community because I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to change things for the better.
Episodes of the Green Corn Rebellion show are sponsored by Oklahoma Progress Now. Oklahoma Progress Now is a 501c4 organization focused on building progressive power in Oklahoma. Their primary efforts are on developing progressive content for a 21st century audience, coalition, and capacity building across progressive organizations and causes, and working to see elected leaders who are more responsive to their constituents and the needs of the many. Areas of focus include progressive messaging and communications, coalition building and resource sharing, and focused progressive policy goals. You can check out their Twitch live streams, and they go live on Facebook on at noon, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Please support this organization. It's a really great organization. It's just getting started here in Oklahoma. Thank you. Now enjoy the rest of the video. Yeah, yeah. I noticed that as well. Like whenever I was, people still tell me this, but it was definitely something people told me when I was like 18, 19 years old when they knew that I was interested in being active in politics or eventually running for office like I
Hmm.
am now. But um, people would say to me, they're like, "Oh, you need to leave the state. You're not going to get elected here. You can't do any good here. The D by your name is not going to let you do that."
Hmm.
And I was like, "I'm going to stay here because even if I don't get elected, I can still do some good here. And like someone has to do it.
Hmm.
It's not just going to be everyone leaves and there's no effort at all in Oklahoma to make things better. I even say the same about becoming a teacher because people always say to me, like, you want to teach in Oklahoma too? Like, it's one thing to be a teacher, but like Oklahoma? And it's like, yeah, well, someone has to do it. Like,
Well, who taught you as well, right?
exactly. Like, it's like someone has to do it. I would like to be the person that does it, and I want to do it well. And like it needs to be done. Like it's not something that you could just say like, oh, everyone just needs to leave because it's bad. Like so
Hmm.
therefore no one should stay to improve it. It's just like helpless all around. And but yeah, like so I definitely agree with what you're saying when it
And
comes to yeah, go ahead.
on top of it, I would imagine we both share this. It's like it's having faith in the people around you, right?
Yeah.
This isn't just sort of like a blind faith thing where it's like, oh, just go back to wherever you're from. It's like I just know the communities that I'm a part of, and runs the kind of political spectrum I would say, working class, but Austin at least, is fairly liberal in a sense. But even then, it's like the kind of politics that we're talking about is very different from just like blue no matter who kind of stuff either, right?
Yeah.
It's a faith in the people around you, and like the recognition, at least on in my opinion, that like there's a hell of a lot of possibility in all of these places that I think has been ignored. I think maybe just because of conventional wisdom, as you were saying, the way that people react to being a teacher or running for office in Oklahoma, um, right, might sort of confuse some folks. But also, the way that we've been doing politics for so long in this country sort of does like foreclose the possibility that it's going to get any better anywhere except for like these hyper liberal metropolitan areas, right? And I don't agree
Yeah.
with that perspective at all. So yeah, it's like it's one like, okay, well, that's where you're from, you want to make your community better, but it's also like a deep faith in the people who I've known my whole life, and a belief that not only should their life be better, but like these are the kind of people who actually have the ability and the power and the vision potentially to do it. But we just need to give people hope, really, which is something that is severely lacking. Even people who share a political perspective, oftentimes they don't think that anything can get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my next question is what got you into politics? What got you interested in politics?
I mean, twofold. Like, I was always really interested in history ever since I was young, right?
Hmm.
So that kind of interest is certainly going to direct you, to be paying attention to what's going on in the world around you, currently. Um, but being interested in politics, like for me, like um, I started to really become more interested in it, or at least considering myself to be more active in it. Um, as I started to realize the contours like around me, like I grew up like really working class and and poor, frankly, and starting to see that like those kind of stories that you get told as a kid, that it's like hard work pays off, and the people who make money like they deserve it, the people who are struggling is because they have some defect, right? Realizing that that was BS. And the people around me worked harder, were oftentimes smarter than other folks who had been given pretty much everything their entire life. That started to get me to question some things, and that analysis very quickly started to lead me to politics, in the sense of realizing, okay, well, if it's not just the story that we're being told, like what is the reason, what is the kind of engine of creating the outcomes that I'm seeing around me.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of how it was for me. I would say my interest in history was always there, but it wasn't as like explicit to me.
Hmm.
Like I, it was more of a, let's see, like I watched a lot of, like when I was like 10, 11, 12, middle school age,
Hmm.
I watched a lot of Tom Hartman on like Free Speech TV.
That's
And
pretty amazing.
yeah, and like, so he would talk about history a lot.
Hmm.
And, a lot of that had to do with like politics as well. So it was like, to me, haven't really been able to always separate the two, at least in the grander scheme of things. Like, I mean, obviously, there's some parts of history that don't have very much to do with politics, or there's certain
Hmm.
histories that have very little to do with politics. But like that, his whole thing was he would talk about a lot of historical things that happened, in 1700s, 1800s, what have you. And so I always knew a lot and thought it was interesting, but never really thought of it as something that I wanted to learn more about or
Hmm.
go into until I was like a junior in high school. And my best subject was history. And, and I decided, okay, I'll major in history and I'll become a history teacher. And I became a little bit more interested in it then, at least more explicitly, because it was something I knew I wanted to actually do. It was something I knew I was good at learning about or thinking about.
Hmm.
And, the politics was kind of there as well. So for me, it's like I can't really separate the two whenever I talk about my interest in them.
Hmm.
So yeah, but yeah, so when you were like younger, I guess like teenager or high school, I guess, were you like, did you like know what you were or identified as politically or what things you supported and stuff
Hmm.
like that?
No, I mean it was a bit of a mess, to be frank. But I mean, so my family was pretty liberal, um, growing up, and I always held true to, like, those basic tenets of, like, anti-racism. A lot of my family is gay, so obviously, like, I was, gay marriage was a supporter, things like that. Um, but I started to get a little frustrated with the answers I was getting from folks. And I started to really doubt. I mean, really, frankly, I started to become very disillusioned with the concept that the Democrats were really out there fighting for folks. So I started looking for something else. And it led me to a few different strange directions. I mean, there was a brief period of time where I was like a Republican, in the sense that I was like, well, free, like, these are the rules of the economy, and they're just holding true to it. And also I bought into that whole the propaganda around, it being in the South, like, this is the
Yeah.
working guy party, right? And then realizing very quickly that was, you know bullshit. um and then, I became kind of a pretty standard liberal, in the sense that I was against the Republican economic platform, but I didn't have a really strong class analysis. I was interested in Marx maybe a little bit, into high school. I didn't really, I think, start considering socialism as like a viable political path or position maybe until high school. I started to become very, very interested in, like, coming up with some kind of synthesis between, like, American democracy, maybe some forms of American capitalism, with, like, the egalitarianism of socialism. Um, so that was sort of where I was when I was 18. Um, but when I went up to school, it was the beginning of Occupy, and I got a pretty quick socialist education, and sort of filled in a lot of the gaps that I was sort of struggling through, and gave me a much more coherent worldview. So, it was a little bit all over the place. It started with doubting some things, trying to find solutions for it, realizing that those solutions were BS, trying to see like, okay, maybe the answers like nitpicking different bits of this and that, realizing that that's not very holistic, and then actually eventually finding something that started to make things click for me, very much so.
Okay. Yeah, like for me, it was kind of a similar thing growing up where like I was pretty much raised in like a democratic household, but
Hmm.
like we were progressive. Even for like the time, like whenever I was like becoming more knowledgeable about politics, I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. So like
Hmm.
I was already like pretty aware of things like LGBT rights and even abortion and stuff like that. And uh so like I knew I was like a Democrat. I wasn't really like a fan of the term liberal. I'm still
Hmm.
not, but like I knew I was like on that like side when I was like a kid. And then Obama came around and I really
Yeah.
liked him. And then after a couple of years, I was disappointed in him and the Democrats. And like I realized that while the Republicans are terrible, there's also a lot of like Democrats that are not really great either, especially like
Mhm.
the blue dog Democrats were like a huge thing back then. So
Yeah.
like, there was them and they were worse back then. Like they were like base, like we think Mansion's bad, but like these people were way worse than Mansion, if that's even possible. But like, yeah, and then like I kind of um in a way kind of got disillusioned with the Democratic Party, but never like went like, okay, like this isn't like a vehicle at all for like any kind of change. And like my politics were like, even when I was like in high school, I think in 2012, that's when I became aware of like the Green Party.
Hmm.
Um, because I think at the time Roseanne Barr was running for like the Green Party nomination or something. I don't know. Weird. But like but like, and I was aware of the Green Party. I was like, okay, they're kind of cool.
Hmm.
But then it was like, okay, but like they're not even on the ballot in like a whole bunch of states and they're just not gonna win. So we still have to support Obama, even though I'm not really huge on him. And then 2016, was Bernie, and that was the first year I got to vote as well.
Wow. Did you get to vote in the primary?
I did, yeah, because my birthday. I don't know if they've changed the rules at since then, but here in
Hmm.
Oklahoma, it's 25 days before the election. You have to register 25 days if you're not already registered, of
Hmm.
course. And my birthday was like the cutoff date. So I had to fill out the form that night, and after school on my birthday, I drove it to the county election board. And
Wow.
yeah, I was barely able to vote, but I got to vote for Bernie. And I'd known who Bernie Sanders was since I was like in middle school.
Well, because you were watching the Tom Hartman show.
Exactly, because I was
Pretty
watching Tom
amazing.
Hartman, and like, and like him and Elizabeth Warren were like my two favorite politicians at the time. And I figured, okay, if either one of them runs, that would be great. Bernie ran. I was like, okay, cool, let's go Bernie. And that was something.
No.
And it's funny because like a lot of people they're like, oh, I'm a Bernie Sanders person, or I like Bernie Sanders. It's like, oh well, I've been a fan of him for like my entire life,
Yeah,
and
no, you beat
you
me.
you have no idea how disappointed I was to see him lose twice.
You know what makes me so sad is I never got to vote for Bernie.
Really?
I
How
mean,
not?
just because of the way that the primary cycle goes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I might have been able to, but I'm just saying, like, whenever I voted for him, it was already done both times.
Hmm. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Like I never got to vote for him in an election that was competitive. He had either already conceded or whatever. Um, I don't
Yeah.
know. it makes me sad. I wish I had the opportunity to have
Yeah, because like, what was it in 2016? Because I'm Oklahoma's Super Tuesday, so
Mhm.
in 2016 he swept half of the states or most of the states on Super
Yeah,
Tuesday.
in Oklahoma.
Oklahoma was one of them, and
Yeah.
that was huge. That was, oh, we were riding high on that for 4 years.
And I remember those.
And yeah, and that was really cool, like getting to vote for someone and then the first time they actually win is like, oh well,
Yeah,
being
that's
like a
complete opposite
progressive.
as of me. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
being a progressive in like a red state nowadays, like you get like, that's like your that's a pretty rare thing to hear. Like, oh, the first time I voted, the person I voted for won. It's like, oh well, okay. But yeah, but yeah, and like I wasn't quite like, when I was in high school, I wasn't quite ready to say I was like a socialist because I wasn't sure what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to, like, I knew what social democracy was because it's easy to explain to people, but like I didn't know what socialism was. And then when I got into college, they turned me into a Marxist. No, I'm kidding. I started looking up some stuff online and understanding what the phrase workers owning the means of production is. And I'm like, okay, like workers co-ops, that kind of a thing. And I was like, okay, that's something I like. Boom. So yeah, so it was kind of a slow transformation. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but by 19 I was in there. But yeah. Um, what else was I gonna ask about that? But yeah, what are your thoughts on like Texas politics? Like whether it be from when you were growing up or even now.
Um, I mean, Texas, like Oklahoma, has a really great history of progressives and socialists and working class politics. And I think one aspect of like learning your history that could be really helpful, as you know, from your show's name, is that like you can actually root things
Yeah.
in these really incredible movements, right? While like we were talking about earlier, how people tell you this or that about like, oh, well, you're from here, so this means you have to be like this. These places like that history is a huge victory of the right, actually, to convince people that the history of these places is right wing and super conservative, right?
Yeah.
Both of these places were hotbeds of American, progressive movements, and I just mean that in the sense of like left wing, and obviously the populist movements um, as well. Like Texas is a great example of this. Karl Rove. I don't know if you're familiar. I mean, I'm sure you know who he
Yeah.
is, but like how he got his name was turning Texas red.
Hmm.
And when he started to push that, everyone was like, "Who the fuck is this wacko?" Sitting here talking about turning this place into like a solid Republican state. But he did it, and he did it, you know, by tapping into the evangelical vote and understanding that suburban politics was going to be very successful in a state that had massive growth. A lot of Texas history is like people moving here over the past, few decades. So a lot of people who were very predisposed to kind of Republican style politics, were coming in. Not to say that like everybody was a squishy liberal in Texas beforehand,
Yeah.
but there was a kind of like New Deal progressive worker kind of conception of politics. If nothing else, that if you needed work, you could get work from the state. Um, and growing up, I mean, you just sort of are seeing what's going on around you. People really struggling, people who work hard, and having that being something that's sort of shared across the board. People not really buying into the system in the sense that they don't think that the system works for them. I mean, I'm a few years older than you, but I'm 28, so not too much. I mean, we both very much grew up in like the like complete victory lap of like neoliberalism, right? The
Yeah.
destruction of the welfare system and things like that. So like you see people who were fed up with the system but having no real hope that something can be different. I think that's one of the big challenges that we have, and particularly in Texas, like I mean, the Democratic Party here, I think that, all of the leadership just needs to be completely fired. They can't even get somebody to run against Greg Abbott,
Yeah.
right? Who has like massively low approval ratings right now. It looks like Beto is going to go, but I think Beto is a non-starter,
Yeah.
and I think more so like the problem of like, because even if like even with announcements late in the game, it's like it's really late in the game. Like somebody should have announced last summer, if it's any kind of typical campaign season for governor. And for me, it just shows not only is like the party itself just bad, and I think the way that they message and the things that they advocate, but there is just complete like raw, like even if you like the kind of positions that the state Democratic Party takes on a lot of these questions, like they're failing at the job of being able to put up
Yeah.
candidates. And just like a couple like general notes, like so there's that failure. They'll do Beto again. I don't think that he can win. I think he'll raise a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah. And then
Um,
waste it.
and wait, I mean, wasted or put in the coffers, because
Yeah.
a lot of those politics are about raising money for the party, these days. Um, and I think they'll double down on this strategy that I think is really, really damaging in Texas, and I think everywhere that it's being tried, which is the suburban strategy. You
Yeah.
saw it pay off slightly in Georgia, right? But those voters are not loyal at
Yeah.
all, right? They won in Georgia because like Trump is, a pig, and people don't want to be associated with him. But they didn't win because people want PRO-ACT or anything like
Yeah.
that. Even the kind of like milquetoast version of like Bidenism, like they don't want that either. And they voted Republican down ticket. They vote Biden at the top, and Republican down the ticket. And here they're trying to do that again, right? And again, people in Austin will donate a lot of money, and you'll win in the in Travis County, but you won't win statewide. You won't win presidential elections here. But it raises a lot of money, and it makes people feel like they're getting something for their dollar. And the last thing I want to know specifically about Texas, man, because this really was horrifying to see, was in 2020, Donald Trump made significant gains. Now, people should understand these groups of people voted for Biden overwhelmingly,
Yeah.
but should be slam dunks. Two groups: um, Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley; those are people who are on the border,
Yeah.
right? And Black folk, right?
Yeah.
And again, like specifically with Hispanics, the Trump being able to eat into those numbers was just amazing to me,
Yeah.
because that's a real fumble. And the other, and also with the Black community here too. And the point is not to like point fingers at those communities and blame them. It's to say that like the Democrats think that they just get to have those people vote for them no matter
Yeah.
what. And people were telling them, you need to send somebody down here because the Republicans are knocking on doors and they're putting up billboards and they're making a case, and y'all are nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Um, and on top of that, sorry not to add too much to it, but one of the biggest reasons when they did exit polling with people, why did you prefer Trump over Biden? You know what folks said? They said, Donald Trump sent me a check for $1,200, and that was mighty nice, right? That
Yeah.
really helped out a lot. And look, we can nitpick and say like, oh, Congress did or whatever, but the point is that the Democrats had a slam dunk opportunity there to walk in and say, we want to extend these payments. We want to, increase protections for people to survive this COVID-19 pandemic. Hell, maybe make some of these programs permanent, right? Like all
Yeah.
these programs that were extremely popular, they were running away from them. Why? Because they were trying to appeal to rich people in the suburbs outside of Dallas, outside of Austin.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's political malpractice sometimes when you see what's going on with the Democratic Party here.
Yeah.
I think one, because they don't have like a strong enough like progressive pro worker message, but two, man, just frankly, they just think that they have captured voters, right?
Yeah.
They're just given to them through like divine providence. And unfortunately, like you have like there's no cheat code to politics like that where
Yeah.
you're just gonna win. Yeah, that's sort of where things have been at here, and I don't know necessarily the answer for them. I mean, the solution of what people are trying to do here is to try to build alternative organizations, DSA and things like that, which have been very, very fruitful over the years. But it's an uphill battle for sure.
Yeah. Like, when it comes to politics here in Oklahoma, I would say there's a lot of, definitely a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
I would say the difference with like the Democratic parties, like the state parties themselves, Texas and Oklahoma, is like with Oklahoma, I mean, like there's a lot less like of a voter base to work with here.
Mm.
It's a lot more how do I say this? Because Texas obviously has more land and is more rural in like the broad sense, but like
Mhm.
you guys have more urban enclaves than we do.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and and that, so that makes like it way more, at least on paper, it makes it a lot more competitive of a state to work with in terms of like
Hmm.
trying to mobilize people or convince people, build relationships with people. So like I would say like here in Oklahoma, like I like our state party chair, Alicia. She's done an all right job trying to build up some of these rural county parties and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And she's done a pretty decent job with that. And I don't think there's necessarily a problem with our state party
Hmm.
necessarily. I mean, maybe there's some things they could be doing, but I don't think there's as much of a problem there. I do think that it really does, a lot of it is building these county parties and having these county parties actually execute plans and do
Hmm.
things and try to build up support. But like the thing you said about, go ahead.
No, I was just curious. In Oklahoma, do you know how long it's been since a Democrat, has won a statewide office there?
Okay, that would
Oh, I'm not trying to give
be,
you a pop quiz if you don't know.
oh
I
no
was
no
just
no,
curious.
I know what it is. I'm trying to remember the year though. I believe that would be, really 2006.
I mean, if
I
you're
w-
even
I want to
fair,
say,
you
yeah.
beat Texas, though. You
Yeah,
know.
I was about to say, yeah, we definitely beat Texas because the thing about Oklahoma with the last, if I'm not mistaken, it was definitely 2006,
Hmm.
and it was Brad Henry. I feel like there might be someone who's like a other
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
statewide position that kept their seat in 2010, maybe, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. So like, I'm just gonna go with the big one that I know
Hmm.
for a fact, which is Brad Henry, the governor in 26 or 2006, which is his second term, and he won every county except for the three in the Panhandle,
Wow.
and he won 66% of the vote against a guy who was my congressman at the time, who was a Republican, obviously, but yeah, um, he got 66% of the vote. And it was
Hmm.
funny because he kind of got elected by accident. If you look at the results from 2002, he didn't get 50% of the vote because there was him, he got 43%. The Republican got 42%, I believe. And then there was a third candidate who was like an independent who used to be a Republican.
So like Looney Tune far right stuff.
I don't know if it was Looney Tune far right, but like I don't really know much about this third
Yeah, yeah.
party guy. But like he
There's,
was he
there's like the Constitution Party or like all those like.
yeah, but he ran as an independent and he took like a solid 10% of like the vote
Wow.
statewide. So if it wasn't for that, Brad Henry probably wouldn't have even gotten to be governor, but he
Hmm.
did. And he had a Democratic majority still in the state house and the state senate, and didn't lose one of those until '06, I think, or '08, somewhere in there. But either way, so he was able to do some stuff. He was a good governor for the most part, especially for the time and for being a Southern Democrat at that time, because a lot
Hmm.
of Southern Democrats at that time had, turned either abhorrently conservative on random things or were just straight up neoliberals, which I would also say are two different things in some ways, but like,
Hmm.
but he was pretty decent. And but yeah, he was the last governor we got that was
Hmm.
statewide. So I'll say that because no senators, no anything like that. there's been some more kind of competitive races. Like governor's race is always a little bit more competitive. The Democrat usually gets over 40%, but like other than that, that's the last time I definitively can say a Democrat won a statewide race, and it was huge. Um, Almost cartoonishly unbelievable to look at now because it's like, oh, that was like in my lifetime. Like, and he was from my hometown too. He was when I was born. He was my state senator. So
Wow.
it's yeah, it was cool. So growing up having someone from my hometown as the governor was pretty cool at the time. But yeah, but but what was it? Oh yeah, the thing you said about the Democrats trying to work on like flipping suburban voters and stuff like that. Um, like I hear people talking about this, and I have friends who are, but I guess you would say are kind of in a way neoliberal. They do favor some neoliberal policies. I don't know if they would be okay with me calling them neoliberal, but they're in that realm,
Mm.
and they love the idea of turning like the suburbs into like permanent democratic territory, and having a base of quote unquote working class people, mostly people of color, of course, and suburbanites. And I'm just like, you do know that like can't work, right? Like that's not
Technically,
I guess
they're
like I guess
opposed
like
interests.
like name me like that can't work. Like it just can't. And like because I remember our former congresswoman Kendra Horn, she was a Democrat who got elected in 2018 to represent congressional district 5, which is most of Oklahoma City, suburb of and then Edmond, which is a suburb, and then where I live in like another county over. Um, but like it's a mostly urban, like urban district. Like it's
Hmm.
not a suburban district. I've heard people say it's a suburban district, but like no, like it's really not. Like most of the people in the district live in Oklahoma City. But
Hmm.
either way, but like I remember, and you were talking about how Democrats were running away from the stimulus checks and the extended unemployment. And I remember in like September or October, maybe August, I think is what it was, somewhere in there. She was one of the few Democrats saying that we needed to like end that so we could start putting people back to work. I was like, she doesn't have to say this. Well, why are you saying this? Like when people are about to send their kids to school and
Hmm.
like, and what was it? And this was last year, so there was no state mask mandate. Some of the bigger cities had mask mandates, but there's no statewide mask
Hmm.
mandate. Governor had coronavirus like at the time or something. like it was it was just bonkers to me. I was just like, why? She doesn't have to say this. Like, no, people are okay with these with the checks and the extended unemployment. They don't know what's gonna happen in like
Hmm.
a few months. And this is before the vaccine and everything, and she ended up losing. I don't know if it was in part because of her hesitancy on that or for any other reason, but I do know that like running away from that was just like not, it didn't seem very smart to me. And I see um what's some of the other stuff, but yeah, you were talking about how our both of our states have like a progressive history behind them with the politics. And it's so funny because like we had, I know probably other states have this where they have a semester class in high school where they have a history of their state or something like that. So we had Oklahoma history, I think, my freshman year of high school. And I don't really remember actually learning much of anything about like the state's history, really. Like it was like we learned about what possible like European explorers possibly came here. We learned like, what else did we learn? So like like the first few chapters of the book, it's probably a different book now, but like the first few chapters were
Mhm.
like relitigating the explorers and stuff like that. And I think I think we talked about the Civil War a little bit, which is also weird because we weren't a Confederate state technically. There was some Confederate battles fought on Oklahoma land, but still. But that was like the bulk of it, and I don't even think we really even made it to statehood. And I took in college, I took a state and local government class last semester where we talked about state and local government. And one of the books that we had was particularly about Oklahoma's history of setting up our constitution. And it was really cool because it talked about how it was a lot of populists and progressive leaning
Mhm.
people who helped build like write our constitution. And that's why our constitution and the way that certain things are set up to this day are ran that way. Like we have, because there's like it's super pro democracy, so like I think in most other states you have a governor and then they pick their lieutenant governor and they run as like a ticket. I think probably like half of the states still do this. But like in our state, you have governor, lieutenant governor, uh, a 3-member corporation commission. You have an insurance commissioner. You
Mhm.
have a state superintendent, which is like
You
over
vote for
public
judges there
schools.
too?
We do.
Yeah.
Um, well, not for the state, not for the state Supreme Court though. Not well, no, we do vote for retention, so yes,
Hmm.
technically. Um, and then the county or district judges, and then what else? What are the other statewide positions we have? Oh, we even have an auditor that we elect.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, and there's probably like one or two other positions I'm forgetting, but like we're like the only state that has like all of those different things and an attorney general. So like all in most other states only have like maybe 3 or 4 of those things that they vote on. We have like
Mhm.
about almost 10 of them. And like and that's kind of a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
But also like, you know, and because it kind of I disagree with the lieutenant governor thing because functionally speaking, the lieutenant governor in our state doesn't really have much power.
Fascinating.
Like they don't function the same way as like a vice president would.
Mhm.
At least not 100%, but like yeah, but like either way, like it's in also the ballot initiatives, and I had no idea that this was a thing. A lot of states don't have ballot initiatives where they can petition for a certain ballot question and then have it be put on the ballot. We're one of the only states that does that. I think maybe there's like 10 other states that do that, but we do that. And then there's like so many different things that was part of the Oklahoma Constitution that we still use today. And like we didn't learn anything about that in
That's
Oklahoma
amazing. Yeah,
history.
because I mean that's at least functional.
Right.
Right.
Like and like I what is some of the other stuff I learned? Like I feel like in my state and local government class where it wasn't technically supposed to be about Oklahoma,
Mhm.
like I feel like I learned way more about Oklahoma history in that than I did in my actual Oklahoma history class in high school. And I was just like, that's crazy. But like, yeah, there's like this huge like left wing and like even socialist history of Oklahoma. I remember this is always a fun thing, and I encourage anyone to do this. If you live in like a southern state that was ran by Democrats for 100 years, go through each governor and see what they did while they were governor and see what type of Democrat they were. Because like it's so wild. Like you have some that were part Native American
Oh yeah,
or
yeah.
something, but they were like super racist towards black people
Mhm.
or whatever. Or like, what was it? There's this one dude. I say that I think his name is Alfalfa something. I can't remember his name. He was governor in like the 20s. But I say he's like Tucker Carlson the governor, he's like Tucker Carlson, but like for that time, because he was like anti corporations, uh but like also anti black people and anti
Mhm.
like immigrants or something. It was like wild. And then there was also some governors that were pro civil rights and pro like social welfare from the state. And I think there was this one guy, he was only governor for like 9 months or something in like the 20s or like 30s, somewhere in there. Jack C. Walton, and he was impeached by the state legislature because he suspended habeas corpus in order to tell like the state police to go after the Klan. And like you can't have the governor going after the Klan in Oklahoma in the 20s. So they impeached him, and he ended up getting elected to something else later on. But like that was like a wild piece of history that I feel like
Mhm.
should have been touched on at some point. But like there's some pretty wild stuff in there. And like um but he was like almost pretty much considered to be like a leftist at that time. And there were some governors who were like that. And when you move into the 60s and 70s, it gets a little bit more modern in a way. But
Mhm.
it's still interesting. But no, like there's, what was it, one of the times that Eugene Debs ran for president, Oklahoma was the highest percentage. I
Mhm.
think I can't remember which year it was. But yeah, like there's like rich left wing history here in Oklahoma and in Texas.
You got to remember, those are people's grandfathers,
Yeah.
or grandmothers, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just like, like that's like, I mean, like history is like obviously like motivating, but like you talk to people who are like from their place, they go back a few generations, like, your family was like a part of these cool things. So like
Yeah.
maybe you should be a shithead.
Yeah, like it's wild. And then I don't know if this is like this in Texas, but like pretty much anything that is named after a person here in Oklahoma is named after a Democrat. Is it
Okay.
also that way in Texas?
I mean, I would assume a lot of them, yeah. I mean,
Because
just
like
because the parties having power. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, I was gonna say because like I realized this when I was like 18 or 19 or something like that. I was just like, wait a minute, just about all these different places I see, either running up on I-40, going to Oklahoma City, or like going where else would I normally go? But like, yeah, like it was like wild. Like I think um we also have two airports in Oklahoma. uh Will Rogers, I can't remember what the name of the other one is. Will Rogers was a Democrat. Also, we have two airports that were named after people who died in plane crashes, which is also kind of weird. But I think they were both Democrats too, which is also a
Well,
coincidence.
that's the
Yeah.
problem right there. They're all dying in planes.
But yeah, like it was, but yeah, like I like in all of these Democrats that these different things are named after, all these Democrats believe different things. And
Mm.
like it's so like wild. Like the history of the Democratic Party is very fascinating to me. Like especially back in the day. Now it's not as interesting. But like back, 100 years ago, or 60, 50, whatever years ago. But yeah, let's see. Next question here. Now that we've been rambling about that. So how did you meet Michael, and how did he end up asking you to be part of the Michael Brooks show?
I met Michael. I was living in Washington, D.C. That's where I went to school, and started to realize that I didn't really want to. I was doing work for a couple of nonprofits and NGOs and stuff there. Didn't really want to do that, and had this realization that there are a hell of a lot of social stuff in New York City. So quit my job, which is probably not the smartest thing I've ever done, but it worked out in the end, I guess. And I moved up to New York, and I was just sort of getting by. And, uh, after being there for a little while, I got coffee with one of my old professors, Luke Mayville, who people might know. He runs a great organization out in Idaho, where he's from, called Reclaim Idaho. Um, Anyways, I got coffee with him and just sort of saying, trying to figure things out. He said, "Well, let me get you together with a friend of mine who's just launched his own show, or is about to launch his own show called The Michael Brooks Show." So I'd never seen the Majority Report, or I wasn't familiar with any of these folks. I was like, "It sounds good." Um, Had a phone call with Michael and got together, and we were just sort of hanging out. weren't really talking about much. I mean, there was no potential job or anything like that up front, but we got together and are hanging out, and I had mentioned to him how, because I studied philosophy at school, and a lot of people in my I don't want to digress too much on this, but there was this weird thing where a lot of people in my philosophy class, specifically one on like psychoanalysis, were like getting really into Sam Harris. um yeah, which is weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird, one, because we don't like Sam Harris, don't get me wrong, but it was just weird too, because like when the other people are using philosophers like Sartre and like uh Lacan and working through Freud and stuff like that, it's just weird for somebody to start throwing Sam Harris in the mix.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, it was just sort of out of left field for me. Anyway, I was joking with Michael about that, and we were making fun of Sam Harris, I guess, as a political figure and all that kind of stuff. And we just got along. So he asked me if I wanted to come and start hanging out around the shows, and uh, we did. And that eventually, turned into something a little bit more formalized. And I ended up becoming like his writer for the show. So I'd help come up with what we were doing, and the opening commentaries, would write those like scripts together with him. And yeah, I mean, it was obviously an extremely meaningful relationship, and I miss him so terribly. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where you never really know who you're about to meet, and this was somebody who was definitely going to change my life for the better, and I'm very, very lucky to have met him and been able to spend those years working with him.
Yeah. That's that's pretty cool. Um, so tell me more about your time on the Michael Brooks show and what it was like to witness the growth of the show.
It was, I mean, it was a roller coaster. I mean, it all started to happen really fast. I mean, to be honest, when I first started doing it, I don't think I really had like, if I would be watching it right now, I sort of know how these shows sort of grow, and I know how to sort of judge how they're impacting folks. When we had a studio, which made it feel very professional, and obviously Michael had the the day job with MR, but it took a little while until people started to talk about it in context other than like directly people who I knew were like watching the show, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Or like being out and like having beers, like me and Michael being out, somebody walking up and like saying hello, like they're fans of the show. Um, I mean, working on it was a lot of fun. It was very disorganized, which I think fit everybody's personality. And um, I mean, I mean, it was a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, we'd show up later in the afternoon. The shows went up 7 Eastern. Um, hang out for a couple hours. We were supposed to be doing prep. Typically, we would just be fucking around. Michael would be doing some impression for like 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Maybe more, just going off on something. A lot of those were so funny, but they just couldn't be aired. They weren't hateful or anything like that, but they were inappropriate. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, um, but yeah, like it was a lot of fun. We were just sort of all like hanging out and riffing and talking about things. Sometimes it'd be a serious thing. Like I remember when they were first starting the coup attempt against Evo Morales.
Mm-hmm.
We went live as the discrepancy happened. For people who aren't familiar, just like really quickly, like basically they have a quick count and like the official count, and the quick count got interrupted because there was an issue. I can't remember exactly why. But the second that that happened, the right wing started crying, and basically saying that there was fraud
Yeah.
on a mass scale. And again, like the official count never was interrupted. It was just like the quick one that goes out to the media. Anyway, when we went live, we had to sort of make a call about how we were going to treat it, because we weren't going to get much more information other than just sort of what we knew beforehand, right? It was like a breaking story. And I remember us talking, like, just those are the kind of moments that you really remember, right? Politically, at least, like talking about it and saying, like, okay, like, would Evo fuck around? Absolutely not. Like, and then very confidently coming out and saying this was bullshit, and knowing it was bullshit from the start. Um, I don't know, like that's a moment that was like really incredible as like a professional doing media, but it's also something that very proud of, that we made the right call, that we didn't hedge our bets, because that was a really important moment in all of that. And a lot of other progressive commentators and stuff, they hedged for a long ass time, and some of them have never apologized
Yeah.
for calling Evo a dictator and shit like that, which is absurd.
Yeah.
But it was just like that was a real moment when I remember being a part of the team and thinking, like, this is a good unit, like we're able to, like, not only are we proud of the stuff that we've done before, but like what we're crafting is really, really powerful. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of that. It was you know you get texts from Michael late at night, just like an idea pops into his head and stuff like that. So you were sort of always working on it, but those Tuesdays were the big days. And yeah, I mean, it was work, but it was a hell of a lot of fun, and there's a lot of growth, and it was great. I mean, it was really wonderful for me being able to meet so many people so quickly, and
Yeah.
Michael trusted me and giving me a lot of opportunity to do the kind of things I was doing early on was really special as well. And yeah, I mean, the best bit, other than all of the normal stuff, is like those live shows were a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Not only
I
were
was
they
gonna
fun,
ask about that. Yeah. The
yeah,
live
I mean, not only
shows.
were they like just fun because you're hanging out and you're relaxed and everyone's having a couple beers and stuff like that, but it was just really nice being able to see everybody, because there's a bit of that kind of work is like, we knew a lot, a lot of people were watching, but like for you walk into this room that there's a camera and a couple of microphones, and you're just going for 2 hours and then you go home, right? And like, even though people are watching and listening elsewhere, it was like seeing all those folks
Yeah.
was a really wonderful experience. And you feed off of each other, and being able to meet everybody and get to know everybody was something that was really beautiful. And I just wish we got to do more of them. I know, like, before the pandemic hit, we were going to come and do one here in Austin, and I'd
Yeah.
been looking forward to that for a really long time. Very devastated that never got to happen. But those, yeah, just like, good times. It's top of the world. I
Yeah.
miss
Like.
miss him dearly. It's crazy sometimes. I can't get too sad, but
Yeah.
I'm happy right now. But like, you think about it, you want to text him. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to hear his thoughts on LR, Left Reckoning, what Matt and I are doing right now, and that's how life goes, I guess.
Yeah. Like I was. I think this is before the pandemic really started, but like I was thinking about going to the Austin show because I think like at the time it was like, okay, I have the money, but like because I was thinking about it like in February, so this is like
So right,
before the
yeah.
pandemic, yeah. And I was like, okay, because I think it was in April, scheduled for April, I think. And so I was like, it was like 2 months out, and I was like, okay, I have the money for it, but like, how am I gonna get there? What am I gonna do? I think I
Mhm.
eventually just like decided I wasn't gonna do it. I was like, okay, no, I'm just not gonna do it. Then the pandemic started. I was like, oh well, um, okay. But yeah, and I still like occasionally sometimes I'll go through like a week or so where I just watch old Michael Brooks either
Mhm.
shows or clips, and I'll look at some of the old live shows. And those are really great,
My
especially the
favorite. I
one.
mean, they're all really great, but I think the
Yeah,
funniest one was LA. If
That
you
was the
haven't,
one where it was Waz was there and Anna Kasparian, right?
and Nando.
Yeah, yeah, because I remember that's the one where uh Anna got to talk about Dave Rubin. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
one I
that was a big
watched. Yeah,
hit. Waz was wild. That one was the funniest one because they
yeah.
had a nice green room and they were like they hooked us up with like really nice tequila backstage and beer and stuff. And I was a bartender back in the day, so I was making people cocktails before the show. And I hope he doesn't buy a piece, but Waz got a little bliss. I think we all were pretty bliss, but Waz was pretty wild, and he like comes up, does this whole thing, is like being hilarious and funny as hell, and then immediately gets up, and you were supposed to go just backstage,
Hmm.
afterwards, and then we bring everybody back on later. But instead of doing that, he walked right in the front row and sat down and heckled us the whole night. It was, it
That
was
was
fun.
funny. Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed getting to watch the Michael Brooks show because it started like right whenever I like a little bit after I'd started watching the Majority Report.
Hmm.
So like I think I watched the first Michael Brooks show when it was on live because he had like talked about it on Majority Report, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I did, and I liked it, but I wasn't like sure if I was gonna like try to keep up with everything, with
Hmm.
every episode. And I friended Michael on Facebook, and like we talked, and he was like, "Oh, you need to check it out." Blah 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 blah. And then I was like, okay, I need to catch up on a few episodes, but I'll do it. And then had been watching ever since, and yeah, it was I definitely learned a lot um politically from the show, and a lot history as well. Um that was also the really important part of it, was the history part that y'all talked about. And oh, it was so funny. Like I had a history teacher once, professor once, and to be fair, this wasn't his area of expertise, so I'm not like owning my professor here, but like it was there was a part in the class that we were talking about that involved South America. And I can't remember the specific thing, but like I was asking after class, I asked him like, "Oh, does this have to do with this? Because I know this is this." And he's like, "Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa! I don't know anything about that, but you could ask this person, and they might know." And he's like, "But it's cool that you know all that." And I learned it was just stuff I had learned from
Wow.
TMBS, and I thought that was kind of funny. But like,
That's
yeah,
really
it
sweet.
watching the show made me a little bit more interested in South American history and politics and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Um, and then y'all's coverage of the UK, I'd already been following UK politics for a while, so that was also pretty cool. But yeah, so tell me a little more about Left Reckoning and how that came about.
Well, I mean, it came about basically because TMBS ended, and you know, so it wasn't one of those things that we were able to sort of plan for, particularly want. But Matt and I knew that we wanted to do something and want to continue doing something in that spirit. But also, having it be our own. And Left Reckoning is, I consider to be a continuation of a lot of things that we were doing on TMBS. Um, the bigger differences are that it's sort of rooted, or at least its orientation is from somewhere else, other than like a big city like LA or
Yeah,
New York, right? um so we do a lot of stories that are more of interest, or at least or ignored, um, by a lot of other lefties, and no judgment towards them or anything like that. But I mean, for me, like specifically stuff that happens in the South and in the Midwest, and Texas, obviously in particular, it
yeah,
would frustrate me a little bit to see the lack of conversations about things that were going on. I remember when there was all the big conversations about defunding the police going on in the country, right? Um, and not even getting into that, it was just like it was always talked about in this hypothetical, right? And essay after essay, it was like, well, Austin defunded the police, not completely, but like there's at least an experience of what happens when you cut a police budget, some lessons, is it good, etc. And it was just
Yeah.
there's nobody talking about it, and it was just one of those things. It's like especially for the people who are really really passionate about it, I was like, I couldn't believe it. And I think a lot of that does happen because people are sort of rooted in wherever they are in the country.
Yeah.
So we wanted to, like the point is like Left Reckoning is not like a state or local politics show, right? It has a very like national, international focus. But we try to do something a little bit different where we are rooted in these histories, and we do a lot on the Dakotas too, where Matt is from.
Yeah.
But it's an internationalist show. We continue that same perspective, but primarily it's again, we didn't pick the conditions that we were in, but it came to being after post Bernie 2020, into whatever Bidenism is, and trying to sort of figure out a way for a left project on a national level to sort of find itself. And just trying to be a media source that can cover the stories and give the analysis that can hopefully help that project out a little bit, like in the same way that TMBS sort of was post Bernie 2016 too. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard to predict what the future is going to look like, but here's what's going on right now. Here's some analysis that we can do, and some ideas of what we can be doing going forward.
Yeah, like that's why I like y'all's show, because like it's not so urban focused, and it is coming from the point of view of two people who grew up in, places that, most people either A, don't think about, or B, if they do think about them, they don't think anything progressive or left wing, or um, in some less charitable places, good. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like it's very like, I even like you guys have done some coverage of Native American issues and indigenous peoples
Yeah.
issues, and not a lot of people on the left are even talking about that at all. But for me, living in Oklahoma, I'm like, when I think of people of color, I don't just like, the first thing I think of is Black people and Native people, because I
Mm-hmm.
myself am Black, and I grew up, my hometown and the schools I went to, a lot of Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
and I that's like where my head is at when it comes to those things. And for a lot of other people, like it's so funny because like I'll meet people even in neighboring states like Missouri or something, and they'll say, I've never met a Native American before, and I'm like, really? That's
Hmm.
wild. Like it's weird to me, but like I also know that, like, yeah, they're, my state has like either the highest or second highest population of Native Americans and
And the
recognized
nations, yeah.
tribes. Yeah. And like, so like for me, like my perspective when it comes to that is just like, so like it's wild when I think about how people on the left, and people in general, but definitely people on the left, forget about Native
They
Americans,
forget
and
about them, and then when they do think about them, you know,
they
it's
don't
like
know how to even talk about
they
them.
don't know how to
Like,
talk about them, and it's oftentimes is too symbolic, right?
yeah,
Like I know like there are demands for like doing things like land acknowledgments, and I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but it's like one of those things. It's like people do that in New York all the time, right? And it was just, I don't know, like to me it felt a little bit hollow in the sense that like you're not advocating for people in the here and now. You're not thinking about them particularly, other than for a way for you to express, like you're in church, some like guilt for sins
yeah,
past, right? It's like, no, these are active things that are going on. Yeah. um that was a huge part too. I remember when Matt and I were first sitting down talking about launching Left Reckoning, that was one thing that we really wanted to make sure that we were trying to cover. And I don't know if we're covering it enough as we should. I'd like to be able to do it more, but that's definitely is like one of the big goals, is to making sure that like we're covering Native issues as as much as we can.
Yeah, and like, because like here in Oklahoma, like our governor, he's like terrible when it comes to tribal relations, and he's like wanting to tax the tribes more, and he's wanting to like impede on their sovereignty, and he's suing them and wanting to
Hmm.
continue suing them for whatever reason he wants. And like, it's not to say, which he has said, not to say that there's always been this like great relationship between the Oklahoma government and the tribes, but like in my lifetime, they're Democrat or Republican. There's not been that much friction between, you know, the tribal nations and the governor or the state legislature even. Um, and he's just terrible. Like it's
Mm,
and like another thing, I chatted with Lance from the Surfs a week ago
yeah.
about the Canadian election, and we talked about how I think in one of their debates, uh, there was a question about Indigenous people and the what was it, the uncovering of the mass graves and
The
that
border
kind of a
schools.
thing.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I was like, I thought that was like pretty cool that you guys had like a question in a national debate about like your indigenous people, but like that would never happen in America. Like no one even like thinks about Native Americans. Like it's just it was, but yeah, like it's, but I that's one of the main reasons why I liked your show. It's also another reason why I started my show is simply because like Oklahoma, we have progressive candidates running out here, and we
Mm,
have issues that are very Oklahoma specific, and I'd like to try to cover those things. And I, even though I mostly watch shows that while I'm ideologically aligned with them, like Majority Report, they're based in New York, and sometimes their perspective on certain things is like, I
mhm.
don't know. It's a little too Yankee for me. But
I hear
yeah,
you.
like
No, I mean, honestly, I mean, it's like, if anything, it's just like you have to know things about communities to like be able to talk about them one way or the other. It's like sometimes it's less about what the end result is and just like,
yeah,
oh, you don't know what I know you're
yeah,
doing your best trying to research it at the last minute, but it's clear you ain't from around here, kind of thing.
yeah. Like hearing, no, oh my God. I remember people from other states, white people, of course, whenever the Supreme Court decided last year that I don't remember the specifics of this case, but basically it said that the tribes had their jurisdiction.
Yeah, yeah.
But the way that certain outlets were covering it was set basically as if saying that the state of Oklahoma has to give back their entire state or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. I remember this.
And white people were literally like messaging me from other states, like, are people gonna have to like move? And I'm like, wait, you don't understand how like tribal jurisdiction works in like
Mm.
America and in certain states. It was like so weird to me to have that question be asked by not just like young people, but like by adults. And I was just like,
You
oh,
know,
what?
and
And like I was like, they just don't know. And like it's weird. And they were just tweeting about celebrating this decision, not knowing what it even meant.
well, I mean, and it's like it's understandable that that's the way it is because, like, there are a lot of states where there just not any kind of like tribal jurisdiction as well. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I mean, how much shit do you know about New York City and the
Yeah.
way that that government works?
I don't
Like,
know anything, and it confuses me every time I find something out. If I find something out about it, like what is it?
yeah, but you
Like,
probably knew, like, for example, if you're watching Majority Report, you knew that you were following their mayoral election. I don't think that
yes,
you're probably getting that kind of coverage for any kind of Oklahoma election.
no,
And
like
obviously you
that.
couldn't because it would be insane,
Yeah,
but it's just like, I mean, it'd just be ridiculous if we were just doing every election in the country, just like a
yeah,
drill list of like updates on it. But, you know, people get exposed to like a very specific part of the country through our national media. Um, I mean, another version of this is like the people here in Texas. And Texas is like, I always talk about how bad, not even bad, but how underfunded local journalism is. And it's rough everywhere. The
Yeah.
lucky thing about Texas is that, you do have some decent outlets, at least compared to other states who just have none. Um, but if you go on Twitter, you can follow like the editors of these major Texas papers, and they just have like a running list of insane things that the New York Times has like written about Texas. Just like simple things like just like geographical mistakes that just like
Yeah.
make absolutely no sense. Except for the fact until you realize that they do fly in reporters for a lot of these things. Or if you've ever read a story about the South in like New York Times or Washington Post, it starts out, in the same way.
Yeah.
Either it's like, I walked into the Waffle House and I saw, describes the biscuits or something like that.
Yeah.
Or it will set the scene of like, and I drove into town and Spanish moss was like, dangling over the trees,
Yeah.
right? It's always the same two starts to those stories. And you realize it's like there is like this kind of hilarious template that like almost makes covering the South like too exotic. Um, for a lot of people to wrestle with like the complexities and the histories
Yeah.
that go into it. Yeah, and I think it's the only answer is for folks like us to be sort of take advantage of the technologies and the ability that we have right now to distribute a lot. Another group of friends of ours, like the guys at the Value Labor Report. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I'm not.
No, but they're awesome. There are a couple of unionists in
Mm-hmm.
a few unionists in Alabama, and they started buying up right wing radio
Okay.
uh, blocks because they have paid content on those, and they do a show every Saturday morning um,
That's
on like
cool.
right wing talk radio, and they just talk about why being the union is good and left politics and things like that. And those are the kind of things I think are actually going to turn out to be really beneficial down the line.
Yeah, like speaking of exotic, when you say that national media usually has these kind of caricatured points of view of certain places in the country. Like I remember last year during the pandemic, it's kind of at the beginning, Tiger King came out.
Oh, yeah.
And that was all pretty much based in or around Oklahoma because
Mhm.
Joe Exotic was from Oklahoma. And I got to have a little bit of fun. I still have a little bit of fun with that because, like, I got to meet Joe Exotic. Like, he came to my college because he ran for governor as a libertarian. He was one of the three libertarians that ran in 2018. And they had like a forum in 2017 at my college, and I was like, oh, this ought to be fun. So I walked over and got a picture with all three of the candidates. I still talk to one of them kind of often, but Joe Exotic, I got a picture with him, so I like posted that quite a bit last year. And
It's really fun.
I got to make jokes about it. Like, what was it? I said to people I didn't need to watch Tiger King because I'm from Oklahoma. I lived it. Even though it's like I think I watched like the first two episodes and I was just like, I don't know nothing about any of this. And it's all just seems way too crazy. And I didn't end up finishing it,
Oh wow.
but like to know that like that's now like a thing that people know about Oklahoma or think of whenever they think
Mm.
of Oklahoma is just like, oh no, that's not good. But yeah, like it's but like if that story, but no, if something like a Tiger King had been based in like, you know, New York City or something like that, it probably wouldn't have changed everyone's view on New York City.
Hmm.
Or maybe it would have affirmed it. I don't know. Maybe it would have. I just know that like that I know how like you hear one thing about a state or a state that you don't hear about that often, and then
Hmm.
that'll affect your entire view of that state or that city or that town or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Last thing I wanted to ask you about is what kind of music do you listen to? What are some of your favorite music artists, stuff like that?
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit of a cliche on this. I like country music. I'm a huge fan of outlaw country. A big Willie Nelson fan. I got to see him recently. I've seen him many times actually, but saw him just a month ago, which was really sweet. I really like Sturgill Simpson. If people are interested, Sturgill Simpson's really cool. He's actually done. He did a really cool interview with the Trillbillies, which I
Oh, really? Okay.
really enjoyed. Yeah, I mean, he's a good guy. I mean, he's one of those guys who got into being a professional musician later. Has years and years and years of being a working class guy like the rest of us, and you can hear it in his music. But his story is really cool for that. He has a really great album. His first album, Meta Modern Sounds in Country Music, is phenomenal. He just came out with two bluegrass records, which I love because that's how I learned to play music. And a record that just came out that he did is called Dude and Juanita, um, which is a really kind of fun, old school vibe, sort of storytelling, kind of romanticized versions of some of the stories his grandfather told him,
Hmm.
sort of riding around and actually being like a real life cowboy adventurer. So I've really been enjoying that. And yeah, I mean, I'm a big Waylon Jennings fan. Yeah, I mean, primarily just like that's what's on at my house. I really like trying to think of anyone else that might be interesting to folks. Um,
Any Oklahoma born country singers?
well, I'm sure. Have you ever heard the song Redneck Mother before?
I have not. No.
Oh, man. It's a big time Texas song. It's the kind of song that people sing when they're really hammered here,
Hmm.
which is ironic because the first line of the song is he was born in Oklahoma. But I mean, like, I love obviously Merle Haggard. I know he was born in California, but
Hmm.
his Oklahoma roots.
Yeah.
Um, actually, there's a guy, and I can't remember his name for the life of me. Um, who I've actually really been enjoying lately, who is a singer songwriter. Um, Let me do it real quick. Hang me up in the Tulsa County Stars, which I've been liking a lot. Um, John Moreland
Okay.
is really, really incredible singer songwriter out of Oklahoma who I've really been enjoying. And I'm sure there's somebody who I love that I can't remember if they were born in Oklahoma or not. I usually check immediately to find out if they're, good folk to find out if they're born in Texas, but I
Yeah.
forget the rest.
Yeah, because I think what is it? I always forget their names sometimes, so I have to like refresh myself. But I know for a fact Garth Brooks is definitely from Oklahoma.
Yeah, Garth Brooks and what's
Yeah.
his alter ego?
Chris Gaines, I
Chris
think. Yeah.
Gaines.
Yeah. I want to say Carrie Underwood's also from
Is
Oklahoma.
she?
I think there's like one or two female ones I know are from
I mean,
Oklahoma.
I'm sure there's plenty, um,
Yeah.
especially like red dirt and stuff like that, and like the border is so porous too, like North Texas, South Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah. Carrie Underwood was born in Muskogee.
There you
But
go.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of country singers. I always knew that like whenever I was young growing up. It was like, okay, all the country singers, and not all of them, but like most of like the famous musicians are country singers for the most part. Like,
Hmm.
because I was never into country growing up.
Hmm.
I was into rap, and then I was like into metal. So now it's like rap, metal, and so like there's not a lot of. I don't think there's any real famous rappers from Oklahoma at all. There's like some somewhat famous rock or metal bands from
Oh yeah.
Oklahoma, like Hinder. That's probably like the biggest one I could think of off the top of my head. Flaming Lips, they're a rock band. I
Hmm.
never really was into them, but yeah, like but yeah, the country. And then the other thing is the politics of a lot of country singers, especially some of the ones from Oklahoma.
Hmm.
Decent politics. Like it's not
Oh
like
yeah.
a lot of people. I think it's kind of changing now, but like
Hmm.
a lot of the older country singers from like I guess pre 2000 or 2000s, and then on back, a lot of it's pretty decent politics for the most part.
Well,
Yeah.
just like most music, I mean, the struggle's always been between the musicians and the record label.
Yeah.
The problem with country in the past 15 to 20 years is that the record labels have very much won. Not that there aren't people still making great music. I was just mentioning Sturgill Simpson, but
Yeah.
boy, it's hard to listen to some of the older outlaw country and then remember like what country music was like post 9/11.
Yeah, like I hear a lot of people, they say they don't like what's called bro country, I
Yeah,
think is
bro
what some people
country.
call it, like bands like Florida Georgia Line.
Or even guys like Luke Bryan, just boring.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Like,
Yeah,
and
like
honestly, like, yeah. I mean, because I'll just like there is like a stupid part of my brain
mhm.
that like you can do like the generic country sound like the guitar, like the very specific, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Even if the song's bad, like I sort of like it just because I'm just predisposed to liking it. I don't think it's good music particularly, but it's just like it's
Yeah.
like listening to like a good bass track or something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the bro country stuff is just so bad. I mean, it's like bad '90s R&B with like a white guy singing it, and just like randomly a banjo playing in the background or something.
Yeah, like for me, like there's some of that stuff, like I don't know if I want to say that it's like all like bad necessarily, because like there's like some of that stuff where it's like if I hear it, I'm like, okay, I'm not really into this, but like I can see why some people might like it. But like
Mhm,
also it's like what was it? I think there was, I want to say this was like a Florida Georgia Line song or one that they were like in, and it was
mhm.
like this other pop singer. It was like 2 years ago. It was like a really popular song, was on the radio all the time. I liked it a lot,
Yeah.
but like other than that, like I never really liked any of the other songs. But like I understand people's frustration with that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Like
I'm lucky
it's
here because we have co-op radio,
yeah.
um, which is does really good shows, and there's also some like really great like old school Texas outlaw radio stations, and like very rarely do I have to listen to like a Florida Georgia Line song here, which is like, I mean,
Yeah.
if I was on another radio station or something else for sure, but there are options here, which is nice.
Yeah. Do you like any music that is not country?
Oh, I mean, for sure. I mean, I'm a musician at heart, so there's a lot of other things that speak to me. I'm just telling you what's on my shuffle. I mean, like I truly do like you know all different kinds of music in its own way. I mean, I used to be really into like Thelonious Monk, for example, um, just really changed my life. I mean, obviously, I was into rock, and I know, like, I know you're really into new metal. Obviously, when I was in middle school, I dabbled in that a little bit, and I mean, like, I really do like a whole different, a full spectrum of things. I don't like sort of pigeonhole myself one way or the other. Um, but I do like being back in Austin because I get to see a lot of great bands and the music that I like a lot more than I used to.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. And I'm sorry to give you a boring answer
No,
to
you're
that
good.
question, but like,
You said
I
you
really do like,
yeah.
a lot of different types of music, like, full spectrum reggae, classical, and
Okay.
rap, everything.
Oh,
Um,
what rap do you like? Like
I mean, obviously classics for
mhm.
sure. You know who I really, really like? Is sort of like my dirty fave is Rick
Who?
Ross.
Oh, okay.
I love Rick Ross. I mean, I
Rick
was an
Ross is
athlete.
great. Yeah.
I was an athlete growing up, so it's like anything that gets you sort of pumped up.
Yes.
A few years ago, when I was still living in Brooklyn, I started playing soccer again. I was a goalkeeper, and we won. We won like our little intramural championship 2 years in a row, and Rick Ross was a big part of that. It's game time. I don't need any. I don't want to be listening to Waylon Jennings before game time. I need to get somebody tell me that I'm a killer, and
Yes. Like
Who-
I remember like for me when I was like in middle school, I would watch MTV in the morning, and that was like the only
Mhm.
time they'd ever play music videos. So like I like remember, so like that was like when I was like mostly into like hip hop for like
Mm.
those first few years there. Then when I got into high school, I got more into rock and metal. But like Rick Ross, like I remember watching what was the music video for BMF and I'm Not a Star.
Hmm.
And like I listen to those songs like all the time now. Like those two songs are like in my I already have looked at what my most played for this year songs for this year are so far. And BMF and I'm Not a Star like I'm like the top like 30. Because I
Oh
just
yeah,
play them
dude.
like all like I'll play them at least once a week, but like I love those two songs. The whole that whole era of rap music was like a whole vibe. Like '08 to like 2012 ish,
Yeah.
like the um Lil Wayne in his peak and um Eminem in his second peak, as I like to say. But some people will deny that they were listening to Recovery nonstop in 2010 and 2011, but I will tell them they're wrong. They were definitely listening to it. Yeah, like that whole era and Drake, I guess. I don't really like Drake, but
Mm.
still, that was his time as well, or the beginning of Drake. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that Rick Ross. I don't ever meet anyone nowadays that says they like Rick Ross. So
I'll
that's
own it.
definitely something. Yeah, like he was good. I never really got too much into him, but like I love those two songs a lot. But yeah, and you said that you used to listen to new metal. Please tell me you like to Limp
No, you have
Bizkit.
to listen to new metal. I'm sorry, friend.
Huh? So what'd you say? Repeat
I,
it.
s- I said, no, I don't still listen to new metal
But
anymore.
you used to.
Yeah, you know, sixth,
So
seventh, eighth grade.
yeah.
I was into this. I was into the scene in general. I think probably more the scene than the music, if that makes any sense. I was a little
Okay, yeah.
goth kid.
You wanted to wear Oh no, you probably weren't wearing Janko jeans,
And
I
then it
hope.
was like
But
trip
like,
pants.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know,
Oh
hot
yeah,
topic couture.
yeah,
Um, yeah, you know, just kind of trailer park kid shit. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Having
So
fun and just like,
so so you at one point did listen to Limp Bizkit.
oh, for sure. I
Okay,
did like Limp Bizkit a lot.
yeah. That's the question I was going for.
I couldn't. I was always spelling it. It was funny. I was always
Yeah.
spelling it wrong, both like wrong from how they spell it, but I was also spelling biscuit, but I was misspelling biscuit too.
Oh
I
wow.
have a Yahoo email address, which is like limp limp biscuit spelled incorrectly. Very very fucking funny. Uh,
Oh wow. That's funny. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
yeah.
It's been a real fun conversation. Where can we find you on social media and where can we find Left Reckoning?
Well, you can find me at David Griscom on Twitter and same on Instagram, etc. And Left Reckoning, same thing at Left Reckoning. We do our shows live Wednesdays at 7 Central on YouTube, and now we're doing Twitch. And thanks, man. I really enjoyed talking to you as well. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.